This president, who promised to unite the country during the campaign, has selected the most divisive nominee possible for the United States Supreme Court. And that is our headline this Tuesday night: the arrogance of hope. Well, that's what it has to be to nominate such a radical. Arrogance coming from a party that has an almost filibuster-proof majority, because a nominee like Sonia Sotomayor isn't going to bring anybody together. Now, as we first reported on this program just a few weeks ago, Judge Sotomayor said this about where policy comes from.
All of the legal defense funds out there, they're looking for people with Court of Appeals experience, because Court of Appeals is where policy is made. And I know this is on tape, and I should never say that because we don't make law. I know. Okay, I know. I'm not promoting it, and I'm not advocating it. Okay.
Now, that is the definition of judicial activism. Or take her comments in Berkeley in 2001 when she said, quote, "I would hope that a wise Latina woman with the richness of her experiences would more often than not reach a better conclusion than a white male who hasn't lived that life." Well, apparently President Obama has found the empathy that he was looking for. Then, of course, there is Judge Sotomayor's ruling in the now famous New Haven firefighters case, where she defended what amounts to reverse discrimination. Now, we first reported on that story almost 2 months ago, and we're going to show you that story in just a few minutes. But can it be anything other than arrogance on behalf of this administration to assume that a nominee like this would be embraced by both parties, let alone most of America? And joining me tonight with more on today's announcement is Utah Republican Senator Orrin Hatch. Senator, always good to see you. Welcome back to the program.
Well, nice to be with you, Sean.
The Court of Appeals is where policy is made. I guess you're no longer needed, Senator. I thought policy. I thought there were equal branches of government, but perhaps I'm way off base.
That was certainly unfortunate language, and she shouldn't be making those kind of comments. No judge should make those kind of comments, because judges, in this case, we're talking about the highest court on the land, the court of last resort, a court where the judge's personal predilections or policy preferences should not necessarily be followed. In other words, a judge ought to be doing what's right within the law. They're not super legislators from the bench. They shouldn't usurp the powers of the other two branches of government, the executive and the legislative branches of government. Now, I don't know how much that particular quote is lifted out of context, but all I can say is she shouldn't have made that quote, and she shouldn't have joked about it, because that's very, very serious stuff for a judge to make. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the circuit courts of appeals in this country decide thousands of cases that will never hit the Supreme Court. Now they're talking about putting Judge Sotomayor on the Supreme Court. And I'm concerned about whether she's going to abide by the rule of law, and whether she's going to, what her judicial philosophy is. She said some other things that have me a little bit concerned, and frankly, a great deal concerned.
Well, because the second part of this is the Court of Appeals is where policy is made. Then she said, "Oh, I know I'm on tape. I shouldn't say that. We don't make law." Almost mocking the concept, in my mind, of, separation of powers.
That particular conclave got a big kick out of it, too, as though this is a game that's being played. It is a game that's being played by some of these liberal judges. They actually believe that they can change the laws just by their own whim. And the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is a perfect poster child for that type of thinking. Almost every case that comes to the Supreme Court from there is reversed. And good reason, because those judges act irresponsibly. Not all of them, but the very far left ones act very irresponsibly on that court. And she's on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, which is a circuit, a very difficult circuit with a lot of difficult states in it. We're going to have to, as our responsibility demands, we're going to have to really look over her opinions, her writings, even her unwritten opinions, her speeches, various things, because we're talking about one of the most important positions in our country, actually in the world, when you stop and think about it.
Well, let me ask you, what do you make of the comment in the speech that I quoted from Berkeley, where she said, I would hope that a wise Latina woman with the richness of her experience would more often than not reach a better conclusion than a white male who hasn't lived that life?
Well, if that was reversed by a white person saying that, that white person be drummed right out of the judiciary. I mean, it's just not, that's not wise language. That's one of the things that worries me a little bit here. I come at this wanting to support whoever is president of the United States in their judicial picks. I want to be fair. I want to make sure that that person is treated fairly, unlike the way our people were treated over those years, and especially the Supreme Court nominees. You know, when Alito has the overwhelming Democrat vote against him, as competent and tremendous as the man is, I thought it was disgraceful. And I don't want to see that on our side. But on the other hand, we do have an obligation to look at what the judge stands for and what the judge says and what the judge's judicial philosophy is, as well as character, as well as integrity, as well as temperament.
All right, Senator, but let me go back to your words. And you said if this were said in reverse by somebody else, they'd be run out of town. So you hear her remark. Go ahead.
You could hear the Democrats right there. If we had a Supreme Court nominee who was a Republican, and the Republican said so, and a white Republican, male Republican, and he said something like that, my gosh, that would be the end of that nomination right there. Now, I think we have to make some allowances here, but I question how much.
Well, and remember, when Bill Clinton nominated Lanny Guinier for the Civil Rights Division, the nomination went down in large part because of her position on quotas. Then we've got this case, the New Haven firefighters, and for the sake of our audience, we're going to go into great detail on this in a few minutes, where this is a case of clear and obvious reverse discrimination. And look how many of her decisions also have been thrown out, you know, when she has ruled on them, been overturned by the Supreme Court itself. Does that case in particular bother you?
Well, to me, that case has to be reversed by the Supreme Court, and I personally believe they will reverse it because it is reverse discrimination. It was very unfair for a person who fought hard and studied hard and did everything that person could do to be accepted. And frankly, to be shot down just because the person is not a person of color is not right either. All I can say is this: we should be fair to people and of all ethnic behaviors in our society today. I want to be fair to Judge Sotomayor.
Yeah, I got that part, but all these things are warning signs about her judicial philosophy, about the fact that she has far more radical views. You're pointing out that if there was somebody equally conservative, Democrats would be unlikely to vote for it. Do you see, do you have any leanings based on your early understanding of her that you have real reservations about her?
Well, sure. Let me just give you a couple illustrations. In a 1996 Law Review article, she endorsed, quote, legal realism, unquote. What in the world does that mean? I mean, we got to know what that means. And then she endorsed, quote, legal systems capable of fluidity and pliancy. Well, you know, she goes on to say our society would be straitjacketed were not the courts constantly overhauling the law, she says, and adapting it to the realities of ever-changing social, industrial, and political conditions. Now, look, what does that all mean? That certainly looks like an activist person.
It seems that way to me, and it's very obvious, very straightforward, almost from the beginning. But let me ask you this. Maybe the focus should be a lot of people...
Can I give you another one?
But Barack Obama thought...
Can I give you another... Oh,
yeah, you can go ahead. You're the guest. You go right ahead. Go ahead.
Well, let me just give you another one that's bothering me. In a 2002 speech, she questioned whether judges can transcend their personal sympathies and prejudices in deciding cases. Quote, even in most cases, unquote. And she later stated, quote, and I wonder whether by ignoring our differences as women or men of color, we do a disservice both to the law and society, unquote. Now, she may have a good explanation for that, but it's certainly something that causes you great concern. Because look, these Supreme Court justices are justices for everybody. They're not justices for,
last question,
for one side or for the other.
And it seems to me, I think Judge Roberts had it right, too, that there's also separation of powers. But Barack Obama said, we need somebody who has the empathy to recognize what it's like to be a young teenage mom, the empathy to understand what it's like to be poor, African-American, gay, or disabled. Isn't there supposed to be equal justice under the law?
Well, you're darn right. And you know what bothers me about those kind of statements? The questions by one of our eminent Democrats on the committee of Roberts. He said, really, are you for the little people or for the big people? you know, are you for the wealthy or the poor? Well, they're not supposed to be for either. And Roberts handled it beautifully. He said, look, if the big people are right, I'm going to be for them. If the little people are right, I'm going to be for them. Now, that's what a judge should be. A judge should be unbiased, should not give consideration to a person's wealth or poverty, should do what is right under the law. A judge should not be a super legislator from the bench. A judge should not be making laws from the bench. Unfortunately, a lot of activist judges do exactly that.
I'm running out of time. If you find out that she is that type of justice you're describing, will you vote against her?
You bet your life I will. And I voted for her for the Circuit Court of Appeals, and I would vote against her if she's that type of an activist. All
right. Senator Hatch, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And coming up, much more.